Welcome to Bloom with Chelsea Rose. I'm here with Malia Wright. Welcome. So excited to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. And can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, so I always love that question of the kind of work that I do because I feel like it's really hard to put me into a box. But if I was giving you kind of the elevator pitch of what I do, I would say that I am an Ayurvedic coach. I'm also a transformation coach, and I work in group programs and one-on-one with clients to really connect to themselves and find this true authenticity within themselves.
I love it. Love it. And can you tell us a little bit about where you were born, your childhood, and what led you to this path?
Yes. So I was born in LA. I grew up in the Valley and I guess had like a pretty normal life, but went to private schools because a lot of LA schools, my parents were like, no, we can't keep you in these LA schools, which is another conversation because I think we should have these public schools top notch. But anyway, another conversation. But anyway, but I really had this creative childhood, also this go, go, go mentality of achieving and getting things done. And I actually studied theater in college, and I had all of these ambitions and drives and things I wanted to create and things I wanted to do. And I worked myself so hard. So actually, I came to these teachings and came to these practices because after I graduated college and was living in LA, I moved to New York, and my life was just go, go, go. I was on this machine, this rhythm of achieving and accomplishment and really just trying to do what the expectations I had for myself were. And it pretty much got to a point where all of that crashed and burned, and I had anxiety attacks on the subway every day, and I was depressed, and I just felt like, I mean, the biggest thing I knew was that I didn't feel like myself. And I actually remember going to a a doctor to get a prescription for an acupuncturist, I had to get a referral for an acupuncturist, and I told her about my anxiety and depression, and she just kind of was like, okay, well, are you looking for medication? And I said, no, I don't think so, not now. And she just wrote a prescription, was like, I'm just going to hand this to you just if you want it. And I do understand and recognize that medication is really helpful for mental health for so many people. So, not to knock that in any way at all. But I remember this moment thinking, she just handed me this medication without any alternative option at all. And I remember thinking in my head, like, there has to be another way. There has to be another way, because I bet there's something else going on that's causing this anxiety and depression. And so I was like, oh, nothing. I don't actually remember. I might have taken the prescription because she gave it to me. But and then that kind of led me on my journey to really shift from going in this go, go, go to discovering my own body and what my body needed, which was very different from what I thought it needed. And that goes into like the health world also. Like, I was eating smoothies and salads and like health foods and superfoods and all of these things that I thought were feeding my body, but they weren't. And so Ayurveda is really about tuning into your body and listening and recognizing what is happening right here. And I realized that I wasn't doing that. I was always thinking in the future, thinking about where I needed to be, what I needed to be doing. And that presence, of course, which is the hardest but most simple thing that we can do, was really the medicine. And so just kind of developed, and I studied yoga and Ayurveda and these Vedic sciences, and also started learning more about somatic practices, the nervous system, trauma-informed yoga, regulation of the body. And my mind like keeps on expanding and my passion keeps growing because there's this realization of this aliveness that lives in the present moment and that ability to hold space for it. That I feel like there's a retraining of our culture and of our minds and bodies that we're in the process of now.
Yes, definitely. Oh my gosh, I so relate to everything that you're saying as far as just living in the future and
Mhm.
living for those goals and those expectations, that pressure that we put on ourselves, and
Mhm.
the way we put our value and our productivity and just living that go, go, go to the point where we become so disconnected with what we actually need and we're not actually listening to
Yes.
our bodies and what we need. And I've very much, this year for me, I think has been about unlearning a lot of those ways and learning to slow down and be present. And it's kind of difficult sometimes. Did you
Mhm.
find that it was hard for you to move out of that lifestyle, or what was it that helped you move into that, or is it something you're still working on? What is your experience like?
Yeah. So first of all, it's always an ongoing journey. One of my teachers, who I might mention again because she's been such an influence in my life. Her name is Katie Silcox, and she, I remember her saying this. This was years ago, but it will always stick in my head. Is that the healer is healing at the same time as being healed constantly.
Mm,
And this is something so important as somebody who is a teacher or educator or a person of really supporting anyone, is that you are doing this work for yourself and it does not stop at the same time as being able to support other people, because there are things that you know or understand that can support people. So this is always an ongoing journey. And even during COVID, these last 6 months have been really difficult for me. And it's this ebb and flow, and there's no such thing as this perfect health or this perfect place or being blissful or positive or happy always. That doesn't even exist, because if it did, we wouldn't be human.
mhm.
We are here to be adaptable and flexible, and when things are going down here in these valleys, then we can take a moment and listen and say, where am I right now and what do I need right now? And it's going to constantly be going through these waves.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's ongoing, it never stops. But
Yeah.
I do feel a lot better in so many ways than I used to. Or a
Yeah.
lot more adaptable, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about Ayurveda. For any of our
Mhm.
listeners that aren't familiar with it, could you, in your experience, describe what it's all about?
Yeah, so Ayurveda is an ancient science that has been around for over 5,000 years, which means it works. It's been around for so long, but it is really the mother science or the sister science to yoga. And so yoga has very much been popularized, especially in the Western culture, and shifted and changed in so many ways. But Ayurveda is really the understanding of the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional aspects of balancing your body. So if you think about yoga as the ways that we connect to our bodies and the ways that we connect to our breath and our mind in kind of, well, in some places, a more spiritual direction with meditation in that aspect, Ayurveda is that listening and recognizing what kinds of practices are going to be really useful for me. Ayurveda is this understanding of how can I come into balance with my body so that my natural health can emerge. My natural way of being and adapting can emerge. And I can kind of give you an example. So Ayurveda is based off of the 5 elemental theory of understanding earth, water, fire, air, and ether internally inside our bodies and surrounding our bodies. So when we understand, for example, we're going into the fall right now, we're in the fall, we just had our equinox.
Yeah.
And this time of year is when seasonally it generally gets more dry, it gets more windy, it gets more brittle, things start to fall, there is a death. And there's also usually a lot of movement and change. And, you know, here in Los Angeles, we've had all these fires and there's this dryness, this wind, this change, this movement. And so as we go into the season of fall, where we're having this movement, change, election, like there's so much going on, COVID also.
Yes.
And so naturally this time of year is governed by these elements of air and ether. And so to find this balance, what happens in our bodies if we are out of balance is we can feel anxious, we can feel overwhelmed, we can feel digestive issues like gas or constipation, we can feel dryness in our skin. These are all Vata conditions, right? Mentally, emotionally, we can feel like all over the place. That's a very Vata thing.
Mm-hmm. And can you explain Vata and the different
Yes.
types?
Okay.
I
Yes, of
recently got
course.
into Ayurveda and I find it so fascinating. And I'm still understanding the Vata, Pitta, like the different types.
Yes.
And because I've heard that like we are like a type, but then you also embody all the types. Can you
Yes,
provide what those are and kind of for our listeners
definitely.
explain that?
Definitely. So, like I said before, it's based off of a 5 elemental theory. And we have these kind of categories, which we call the doshas. And doshas are kind of a way to understand where we are in our bodies and where we can find balance. But there are 3 different doshas. And the first dosha is, or it doesn't matter what order they're in, but one of the doshas is kapha, which is the elements of earth and water. So this is like really grounding. Earth and water together make mud, right? This kind of thick, heavy, grounded people who feel in balance with this kapha dosha are really loving and grounded and supporting and kind of like they're like the big bear hugs, like just like warmth and coziness and like yumminess, like kind of this grounding quality. And when we're out of balance in this area, we can feel lethargic, lazy, heavy. We can gain more weight. We can have this sedentary nature to it. This is also predominantly during the springtime. We can feel influenced by this. And I'll explain how our bodies are in relationship to the seasons and things like that. And then we have Pitta, which is for Los Angeles, we get a lot of, because Pitta is the elements of fire and water. So fire and water together create acid, heat, this like sharpness, oiliness. These qualities are intensity and drive and go. Like we live in a very Pitta culture, also
Definitely.
Vata Pitta culture. And so Pitta, when we're in balance, we feel alive and vivacious and organized, and it's the qualities of leadership and doing things that you love. And when we're out of balance, we can feel judgment, criticizing things, anger, frustration, judgment towards ourselves and our bodies. And heat, inflammation, rashes, loose stools, just anything that's kind of like red hot. You can imagine all of those things. And that's, of course, during the summer. We have most of that in that time of year. And then, like I was talking about before, Vata, these qualities of air and ether. So this gets into when we're in balance, we have this ability to find that inspiration, creativity, artistry, the ways we use our minds in powerful ways, the way we just feel like this muse of life. And when we're out of balance, as I mentioned before, it's that overwhelm, anxiety, scattered forgetfulness. So these three doshas, kapha, pitta, and vata. So kapha, earth, water; pitta, fire, water; and vata, air, ether. These we are constantly in balancing act with. And when we're born, we have what's called a constitution. And that's the way that we are born. Like, we naturally have more of these qualities than others. So for example, for me and my body, I have more of the kapha, the heaviness, the groundedness, the motherly energy, and pitta, that fire, that drive, that leadership. Those are qualities. So we have something that we're born with, but we also have what is called the situational, which is really what we do work with mostly. And the situational is what is happening around me in my environment, what is happening right now that is affecting my body to be out of balance with excess or lack of some of that dosha. So right now we have this fall season. Around us, we have so much going on. And honestly, since COVID began, this is also Vata because we're globally feeling this. Mm-hmm. But we can feel this shift, this change, this Vata, this air, this ether naturally happening. So what happens internally in the body is we can easily come out of balance. We can come out of balance by our relationships and that quality, or our families and that quality, our jobs, what's going on with work, what's going on with our sleep, what's going on in the media. There's a shift, and normally, especially in a modern culture, metropolitan culture, we'll find that the Vata and Pitta, that air and ether and that fire, are primarily out of balance. It's not always like that.
I'm feeling that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that. I've been out of balance in those two. And the way that you described them, especially with Vata and the energy and the sort of like feeling a little disoriented. I definitely feel that. And so I know, I'm sure it's different for everyone, but what are some practices that you would recommend for people to get back in balance?
So some of the things, it's so fun because I feel like when I first started learning about Ayurveda, I was like, this makes sense. Like it's like simple opposites. So for example, if you think about air and wind and shifting and change and flying, what is the opposite that grounds that? Or I just literally said it. Yeah, grounds. So we start to bring in more of that earth quality, more of that water quality. How do we ground? How do we connect to what's right in the body? How do we bring our awareness into our tissues? I love these qualities because what really grounds Vata are like root vegetables and good oils and fats and things that are grounding. So I was saying before, I was eating a bunch of salads and smoothies in the winter and juices in the winter in New York City, where it's not like winter in Los Angeles, but winter in New York City, where it is dry and 4 degrees. And I'm eating salads, which are raw foods can be more cooling and can be more drying. And the cook grounding, it's like, what do you want to eat when you are feeling ungrounded or feeling sick? You know, you want to eat soup. You want to eat foods that are comforting. And so this starts to balance the Vata. Doing things, for example, when we think about our yoga practices or our physical practices, doing physical practices that are more calming and grounding, like going for long walks or hikes, or like a slow flow.
Right. Versus like an
Something.
intense workout, which I think we're
Exactly.
programmed to believe that we're always supposed to be, in order to work our bodies, we have to have this like intense workout. Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that too, because I used to do like hot yoga all the time. And when I started learning, oh, wait, this might not be good for me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not something we think about normally. But when we start to align ourselves with the natural rhythms of the world, because we are a part of nature, we are natural creatures,
Yeah.
we are in tune with this environment. And something in our modern culture is that we are not connected, that we are disconnected, that we are maybe better than, that we can
Mm-hmm.
strip the resources of this earth, but we are the same. We are
Yeah.
part of it. So when we see these rhythms coming through the world and through our environment, like that's what we get to tune into. So yeah, I could talk for days about
I
that.
love that. Well, I get more and more fascinated with it just when I think
Mhm.
about healing and the healing needed to happen in our world right now, and
Right.
how I love what you said about us being connected with nature and learning about our nature. And if we can learn to heal our bodies um, in that way, and
Mhm.
knowing that we're in touch with nature, we'll also be more in touch with our planet and healing our planet, which is so needed right now. And I also, just
Mhm.
to touch back on like the diet aspect of Ayurveda, I think is so fascinating, like learning to eat the right foods, and also knowing what your body needs, and recognizing
Mhm.
that we're all different,
Yes.
and what you need might be different from what someone else needs. So yeah, I think we have a lot of these diets and these fads, and we think, oh, I'm supposed to eat, yeah, salads and raw foods. And I was eating a lot of raw foods too. And I've actually started working with an Ayurvedic doctor who has told me, no, you need to eat, everything needs to be cooked and warm. And I was like, wow. So yeah, I've definitely like
Yeah.
have experienced some of those imbalances, and I'm trying to get my body back in balance, and doing yoga every morning has been really great for me.
Yeah. And I love it so much because as you're saying these things for yourself, is some other person might be completely different. So there's no one size fits all
Mhm.
here. For example, I love thinking about this, but the raw food smoothies, juices thing. So it's very popular, of course, in our health conscious city that we both live in, or
Yeah.
whoever's listening this later, you might be somewhere else. But we can really enjoy raw foods, especially if our digestion is feeling great. And the best way to know if your digestion is great is having absolutely no disturbances, meaning if you're experiencing gas or constipation or loose stools or acid reflux or bloating, cramping, like anything like that, that's a pretty good sign that your body is telling you something, like you need to tend to it. But if we're feeling totally imbalanced and we feel like, yes, I feel good, and the sun is warm and we're in the middle of summer where the digestive fire is even higher, then that's a really good time of year to be eating salads, when you want that freshness, you want that thing that's a little bit more cooling in that
Mhm.
area. You want that lightness because it's hot. So it's really interesting because it's really a practice of listening. It's just listening to our bodies.
Yeah, I love that. And so when you're working with a client, how do you assess where they're at, and what sort of practices do you work with them on or teach them to heal those imbalances?
So it really depends on the person. And I can say very confidently that no two people are the same. I would say, so the best way that when I work with people, we always start with a consultation. And this really goes into, I ask so many questions about your whole life and the things that you might not even think I care about. But we talk about your daily routines. What is your life like? What's your job like? What are your relations like? What do you normally eat? What kind of disturbances do you have? What are your bowel movements like? You know, these things, like, do you get any other symptoms coming up, like headaches or irregularity in some area of the body? Of course, those physical ailments will give us a sign of something else going on, but it's going deep into your spiritual practices and your history, your childhood. It really goes into the depth because it's a holistic science that covers all directions. And I will say this, some clients come to me and they want to focus on specific areas of healing their bodies, like their digestion or their hormones or something physically in the body. But most of my clients come to me because they feel disconnected to themselves. They feel disconnected to their truth or what they want to be doing in their lives. Usually people come to me because they're unhappy with what their life, the quality of their life in this moment. And I think that's so interesting because, of course, we can come to somebody with a physical ailment. But most people come to me because they want that connection to re-meet themselves and reclaim themselves in their life and have that, build that relationship. And so mostly when I'm working with people, it's about that reconnection, which is depends on what it is, but it could be meditations, it could be journaling, it could be talking, it could be doing body practices, tending to your food. But I find a lot of people come to me mostly for the mind, healing the mind and the emotional body and the spiritual
Wow.
body.
Yeah. Well, it's also connected. And
Yes.
is that where like the somatic aspect comes in? Can you explain? Like, I'm not sure I
Yes.
even fully understand what that means. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that.
So just talking about somatic, the root word soma basically means your nectar, your sweetness, your kind of like the milk honey of the moon, the lunar quality of your body. So just that root of the word feels so nice, right? It's the lymphatic system. It is the juice, the liquid that is in your body. Somatic practices or somatic awareness is really about holding space for the ways that our body responds. So, especially when we're thinking about our emotions or our feelings, noticing the sensations that start to appear when we might feel activated or triggered or in a situation that feels uncomfortable. And the somatic practice is creating space for that whole experience to be felt so that we can connect to a more calming, more grounded, or more balanced, I should say, regulated nervous system. It has a lot to do with the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And if you might have heard before, we have in our nervous system, we have the fight, flight, freeze. And we also have the parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, soften. And there are ways to be in balance and out of balance in both of them. So, for example, when we have that sympathetic nervous system and we have that balance, we are feeling alive. We are feeling active and like we're doing things from a place of love and from our heart. We are feeling this jolt of activity. You know, like if you think about sex, sex is both sympathetic and parasympathetic. right? We have this action because it feels good and we want to connect. And that's like this activity. But for most of us, we are constantly being bombarded with an active nervous system that is go, 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 right? It's that more masculine quality that is out of balance, that imbalance, masculine quality, that that feeling forced, feeling pushed, feeling active. Like we are in and out of these things every day just by opening our phones.
And really quick, just to backtrack on what you mean by masculine for our listeners, from my understanding, it's not so much about the gender, right? Our balance, we all have masculine and feminine within us, but it's not so much about the gender, but about the qualities that
Yes.
we all embody, right?
Yes. So in everything around us and within us, there is a masculine quality and a feminine quality. The masculine is more linear, more structured, protective. And these are all really great things. Especially when we have that divine masculine or that balanced masculine where we can have that activity. You know, I've been thinking a lot about just activism and where we feel in alignment to fight for things that we believe in from an aligned place, or how we do that even. So that's like a very masculine energy that can have such a great quality. But the imbalance is that it's that linear structured like box that we are in. It's that forced, pushed, I'm just like penetrative, like there, I can't think of another word to think of, but that, you know, it's very directional. And that can be, I think culturally, we've had a lot of that for a long time, for thousands of years, actually.
Yeah. And so the feminine, the other side of that, how would you describe those qualities?
The feminine is more circular, soft, fluid, letting things move, letting things flow, especially when we're in this divine feminine or this balanced feminine. We have these qualities where we feel completely in alignment with just flowing, just being, existing. And the reason why a lot of teachers and I myself focus so much on this feminine quality is because it has been something that has been lacking so much. Now, at the same time, we can also get, and this is where we get into the parasympathetic, where it's out of balance, or the feminine that can be out of balance, where we feel like just numb, dull, nothing. Right? I would say that's not very the divine feminine or the balanced feminine, but it is a quality when we can just feel like nothing. Definitely not the sympathetic. But usually what happens is we get so like on edge that we collapse. It's like we fall off the ladder. Depression, things like that.
And I feel like right now, especially, our nervous systems and that fight or flight, like we're living in that more so now this year with everything going on and COVID and all the fears. Definitely seems that. And I see that imbalance in our culture too, in our patriarchal society, that imbalance of the masculine, and not just because there's like more men in charge, but I mean, that's part of it, I think. But also that imbalance just within ourselves.
Yeah. And I really do believe that overall, the feminine quality is something to really focus on, especially if we've been living a life where we have felt more in that go, 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 active, push myself, do anything at all costs to try to get like this energy of getting, attaining, grabbing. And the feminine is receiving. And I even, you know, I saw this right now as I said that word. You were like,
you could feel me. I literally like had this sigh of relief because I've been so much in that masculine energy. And yeah, that receiving, I think, is something. How can we be more open to receiving? And what are we receiving?
I love this question. I feel like this is my life mission, to be
Yes.
teaching people this. Exactly.
Amazing.
How do we bring ourselves to be more open to receiving? One of the things I love, and maybe this is what we'll do, we'll have a little practice later with this.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite things to do.
Yes.
Is recognizing, so there's this concept that we have of what I like to call like the big me and the little me. So the little me is me in this body talking to you in this podcast episode. And the big me is the part of me that is my higher self, my divine self, or however you like to say it. You could even just say the big self. And the big self is a part of me that knows I have nothing I need to prove, that I am perfect just the way I am, exactly in the space that I am in, that I have needed to do things in my past that I felt like I needed for protection. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. A lot of times we put up walls or boundaries around our heart or our vulnerability or our ability to connect with people, or it could be anything else really. But we had to do that at some point because it was something we needed at the time for protection. This acceptance of myself for exactly who I am, and I am beautiful, and I am abundant, and I am filled with love. And this big self, I love to always think about this big version of myself. This is me. And the little version of me is like, how am I going to pay my bills? What's going to happen next week? The election's in a month. You know, all of these things that are on this plane that are important, but they are the little me's. Mm-hmm. The big me is so embedded and connected to nature. And she is in this rhythm of life. She is the one that is here to receive and to accept what is coming to her. So one of the best ways that I find to begin to bring this awareness of how do I actually give myself space to receive is to recognize that there's a little me and there's a big me. And I say big me because it's bigger than our physical bodies. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things to say is expect the unexpected. I invite the unexpected. I bring in what I have no idea is possible. I think as humans, our brains naturally try to categorize things, put things into boxes, make sense. We can even find this right now politically in our country. We can find it with COVID. You know, we're trying to put so many things in our box because it eases our brain, right? Mm-hmm. But there are so many things we do not know. And the more we try to control, the more we can begin to suffer.
And I think that like as humans, we're afraid of what we don't know. Mm-hmm. I think that fear is what causes so much disconnection between us, between our little me's here on this physical plane.
Our little self fears.
Yeah. Little self fears. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how can we move beyond that fear and not be afraid? I think we're also afraid of the unexpected. We're afraid of the uncertainty, which we are living in this time that I think is so interesting that with COVID and everything, I've found that myself, I've had to learn to surrender to the uncertainty. Yes. And that's something I'm learning. And so how do you personally surrender and welcome and invite in the unexpected?
Yeah. So it's not always easy. It's like, I love to think about it's like a muscle that you're pressing on that is really tight. And your body's like, no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay. Because your muscles like, what if something happens? What if I let go? What would happen if I let go? There is a trust that is there. And it's hard to say because I think when it comes to spirituality, and I'm not sure if you've heard of spiritual bypassing.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely a problem in the spiritual world, where we think everything's going to be fine and everything's going to be good, and we just have to think positively, and we have to think that everything's blissful and beautiful. But no, that's bullshit. It's honestly bullshit. It's not that things are always fine. It's not that things are glittering ponies and unicorns always.
Mm-hmm.
The best way that we can start to invite the unexpected and sit with inviting flow is to recognize, how can I hold space for every feeling and emotion that I am having right now, to not push it away, to not push it down, but to sit with it and say, I'm here. There have been so many times in these last few months that I have just felt so sad and angry and felt grief. And part of my brain says, think positively, right? Part of my brain says, just push it aside and like, we got to get through this. What is the optimistic side of it? This is where my brain goes. Your brain might go in the opposite direction. But that's where mine naturally wants to go. But the second we go the other direction, we just start building up more walls and more layers of closing in. And what we can do is really hold space for the feeling that I am experiencing. If there's sadness, say, I am here with my sadness. I am here with my anger, my grief, to allow it to have a life. These things start to build up and create even more fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grounding in your body and holding space. Like, I'm moving my arms out towards the side because this is the best way to describe it, right?
Yeah,
It's
sort of
really
opening up to it.
opening
I
up.
think we tend to want to close to those
Mhm.
emotions. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think you're right. Like opening up. And so what happens when we open ourselves to those emotions? We can allow them,
Magic.
yeah, I mean, anything, really. Allow them to move through us. And can we even transmute that energy?
Yeah, I find that allowing them to live their course, it's kind of like a wave. And it's so interesting because emotions actually only live in the body for about 90 seconds. And then after that, we're retelling the story.
Mm. Wow.
So, what stories are we retelling? What tapes are we continuing to play over and over and over and over and over again? There's this concept in like yogic philosophy of samskara, which is in the brain. It's like we keep on living these patterns and patterns and patterns. So, for example, if you're thinking in yourself, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be successful, or no one will love me, no one will love me, no one will love me, no one will love me. The more and more we say those things, it's like creating a groove in the brain. And the brain's like, cool, I already know the shortcut to this. I'll make it easy for your brain. I'll make it easy for you. So you'll automatically think it because you've thought this so many times. I'm just going to make it easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so rewiring the brain and retraining the brain is about inviting those other narratives. when I'm saying holding space for your emotions and feelings and allowing them to process, we start to recognize that we don't need to continue telling our story.
Yeah, and I also want to say too, I think it's really healthy when we release that, because
Mhm.
the other side of that, when we don't, when we hold that in, hold those emotions in, that energy in, and we don't allow ourselves to decompress it, I believe that that can manifest physically in our body as disease and pain. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I just wanted to mention that this is all stuff that I've been
Yes.
learning. And so is this the somatic
Yes.
that you're talking about? The somatic, what is it?
Yes.
Experience, somatic
Yes.
healing? How would you?
I don't really yeah, it's really somatic healing. It's using this awareness of the sensations and feelings and presence of where you are, and being able to regulate your body. So this is something else, is regulation, or not even regulation, but like orientation of where your body is and how it can feel safe and how it can feel supported. And it might not be easy to feel that way. One of the easiest ways that we can orient ourselves are to look around our room or our environment, or use our senses and connect to, what am I feeling? What am I actually feeling right now? What does this feel like in my hands? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? This is the best way to immediately come into the moment.
Mhm.
And noticing where your walls are, and where is my body in relationship to these walls. When I'm an animal and I'm looking around, and I don't know if I feel safe in my environment, then I'm going to be tense, and I'm not going to want to soften or allow my emotions to be felt, because I'm protecting, which is your body saying, you need to take care of yourself, right? You need to survive. I used to say this all the time in New York, but everyone in New York is always in survival mode.
Mhm.
So finding this awareness, this space around you, and your relationship to where your body is in that space also gives us a sense of ease, calming the nervous system. Long answer to your short question. Yes, this is somatic work.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much for walking us through all of that. I know it's a lot of information, but I hope that our listeners learned a lot from it. I definitely did. Like I said, a lot of these are concepts that are new to me that I've been learning and becoming more and more fascinated with. And so it's amazing to hear the way that you describe it. I think you break it down really easily, and help us understand what that means to create space. I love the way you talk
Mm,
about creating space and being in tune with your body and feeling your body.
yeah.
And so I would love if you would walk us through a little meditation.
Yes, definitely. So we'll start to find a cozy seat, whatever feels most supportive to you.
In this meditation, Malia invites us to get in touch with our senses and get in tune with our bodies. We connect with our higher selves, our big selves, and we invite in flow and surrender. To join us in the full 10-minute meditation, go to patreon.com/Hello Chelsea Rose and join the Dream Team.
Thank you for that. That was
Awesome.
wonderful. My highest self was, oof, she was like wearing a beautiful dress, sitting on a grassy hill by the sea, like drinking tea and just like feeling the ocean breeze.
Mine was also on the beach.
Really?
Yeah. Like in Carmel, up in Carmel, where it's kind of like rocky
Mm,
and cool and like beautiful soft white sand,
I love that.
which
Yeah.
is not, I haven't had that image yet. Usually it's like a tropical place.
Ooh, I usually go to tropical places too. This
Yeah.
for me was more like a grassy like cliff, like overlooking the ocean
Yes.
with like trees that smelled really good, like eucalyptus trees, and like really rich
Yeah.
soil with like a really beautiful house where I lived.
I love it. I love this for you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Malia. This was so amazing
You're
to
so
connect.
welcome.
And so, where can people find you? And are you accepting new clients? And yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your business before we wrap up.
Yeah, definitely. So you can always find me at maliawright.com. And I am accepting new clients. I do also have sliding scale prices, and I am definitely open because I do know that people are having financial issues right now. So if there's anything like that, you can always send me an email because I'm very open to having a conversation about where that is and how I may support you in any way. I have been also doing these workshops that are diversity, inclusion, healing workshops that basically allow us to create space for these emotions and feelings around a lot that's shifting socially. And so if anyone's interested in that, you can reach out to me. You can send a message on my website.
Amazing.
And I do have an Instagram too, but I just deleted the app off of my phone because, social dilemma.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to contact is via email or my website. And I love talking. So
Great. All right. And we'll link all of that in the show notes so you can all find Malia and connect with her. And thank you so much. This has been so wonderful.
thank you so much.